The day I found the '67 Corvette Stingray in my late Uncle Frank's garage was the day my life became a battle between automotive passion and suburban tyranny. It sat beneath a weathered canvas tarp, a blue ghost frozen in time, with only its iconic silhouette giving away what treasure lay beneath. I had no idea that uncovering it would also uncover the most vindictive side of Sunshine Meadows Homeowners Association. "Holy crap," I whispered, pulling the tarp away completely. A wave of dust sparkled in the afternoon light streaming through the garage windows. The Corvette's Nassau blue paint had dulled over decades, but it was unmistakably beautiful, a sleeping beauty waiting for resurrection. My name is Henry Young, and I'm a mechanical engineer by profession but a classic car enthusiast by passion. When Uncle Frank passed away and left me his house in the suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia, I was grateful but not particularly excited. The neighborhood seemed pleasant enough, cookie-cutter homes with manicured lawns and an active HOA that kept everything in line. But finding this Corvette changed everything. I circled the car, running my hand along its curved fender. The chrome was pitted, the leather seats cracked, and the engine hadn't turned over in at least 15 years according to the registration papers I found in the glove box. But it was all their numbers matching, no major rust, a true survivor. "I'm bringing you back," I promised the car, already mentally cataloging what I'd need. My garage apartment in downtown Atlanta wasn't going to work anymore. I was moving to Sunshine Meadows permanently. The next morning, I was awakened by 3 sharp knocks on my front door. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in her 50s with an immaculate blonde bob and sunglasses perched on her head. Her lips were pressed into a tight line. "Hello." I opened the door, still in my pajama pants and t-shirt. "Mr. Young, I'm Patricia Wellington, president of the Sunshine Meadows Homeowners Association." She didn't offer her hand. Instead, she thrust a thick binder toward me. "Welcome to the neighborhood. This is our community bylaws and regulations handbook. I noticed you're moving in, and I wanted to make sure you understand our expectations." I took the binder with a forced smile. "Thanks, I was planning to look these over." Her eyes darted past me, scanning my living room where boxes were stacked haphazardly. "We pride ourselves on maintaining a certain standard here in Sunshine Meadows. Your uncle was always compliant, aside from a few minor infractions." "I'm sure I'll figure it out," I said. Patricia's gaze lingered on my unshaven face. "The garage door was left open yesterday." Section 7, paragraph 3 clearly states that garage doors must remain closed when not in active use. I was unpacking. "It won't happen again. See that it doesn't." She smiled tightly. "Our next community meeting is Thursday at 7. Attendance is strongly encouraged for new residents." As she walked away, I noticed her taking pictures of my front yard with her phone. I closed the door, dropped the binder on the coffee table, and headed to the garage. The Corvette was waiting, and I had plans. Over the next few days, I ordered parts and tools, setting up a workspace in the driveway. The garage was too small for a proper restoration, and I needed natural light to properly assess the Corvette's condition. I rolled it out carefully, setting it up on jack stands, and began the careful process of documentation. Every part I removed was photographed, labeled, and organized. This wasn't going to be a quick flip. I wanted to do it right. By Saturday morning, I had the engine partially disassembled on a stand, the interior completely gutted, and was preparing to begin work on addressing the body issues. The 327 cubic inch V8 had seized, but I was confident I could bring it back to life without a full rebuild. I was deep in concentration, carefully removing corroded bolts from an engine mount when a shadow fell across my work area. "Excuse me." I looked up to see Patricia Wellington again, this time accompanied by a man in pressed khakis and a polo shirt with the Sunshine Meadows logo. "Mr. Young, this is completely unacceptable," she said, gesturing to the car parts spread across my driveway. "This isn't a mechanic's shop." I stood up, wiping my hands on a rag. "I'm restoring a classic car. It's a temporary project." Section 12, Paragraph 8. No vehicle maintenance or repair work shall be performed on any lot except in a closed garage out of public view. She recited from memory, her eyes narrowed. This isn't regular maintenance, I argued. It's a restoration project. The car is valuable and it belonged to my uncle. The bylaws don't distinguish between oil changes and… She waved dismissively at the partially disassembled Corvette. Whatever this is, you need to move everything into your garage immediately. That's not possible. The restoration needs space and light. The man beside her stepped forward. I'm Richard Martinez from the HOA board. We understand you're new, but rules are rules. You have 48 hours to comply or we'll have to issue a formal violation notice. I felt heat rising in my face. This car is a piece of American automotive history. It's a '67 Stingray, for crying out loud. Patricia's expression remained unmoved. History or not, it looks like junk to the rest of us. It's bringing down property values. I've seen other people working on cars in their driveways, I pointed out. Quick repairs, perhaps, Patricia sniffed. Not disemboweling an entire vehicle. After they left, I continued working, my enjoyment of the project now tainted by frustration. I'd already invested thousands in parts and tools. Moving everything into the garage would make the restoration nearly impossible. There simply wasn't enough space or light. That evening, I flipped through the HOA regulations binder, looking for loopholes. The rules were comprehensive but vague in places. Vehicle repair was prohibited in driveways, but there was nothing explicitly forbidding restoration work. Still, I knew Patricia would interpret any gray area in her favor. The solution came to me while looking at pictures of car shows. If I couldn't call it repair work, maybe I could call it art, a work in progress, on display. I ordered a large canvas tent, the kind used for outdoor events, to cover the Corvette and my work area. It would keep everything neat and contained while still giving me the space I needed. By Monday, I had the tent set up. It was white, clean, and provided excellent light diffusion for working. I added a small sign, Historic Vehicle Restoration in Progress 1967 Corvette Stingray. The piece lasted exactly 3 days. I was carefully sanding down the body to prepare for primer when Patricia marched up my driveway, her face flushed with anger. Behind her was a small procession of HOA board members, including Richard Martinez and 2 women I hadn't met. This, she jabbed a finger at my tent setup, is a blatant violation of multiple HOA regulations. I put down my sanding block. How so? It's covered, organized, and temporary. Temporary structures require board approval, one of the women said. Section 9, Paragraph 5. And that sign, Patricia added, violates our signage regulations. Section 14 clearly states that only approved real estate signs, security system notifications, and seasonal decorations are permitted. I took a deep breath. Look, I understand your concerns, but this is important to me. The car was my uncle's. It's a family heirloom and a genuine piece of automotive history. The history of your family's possessions is not the HOA's concern, Patricia replied coldly. Our concern is maintaining community standards. You have until Friday to remove this entire. She gestured vaguely, situation. As they turned to leave, I called after them. What if I applied for a temporary structure permit? Richard paused. You can submit the application, but the board won't meet again for 3 weeks. And I'm sure we'd need to see detailed plans, timelines, and proof that this won't be an eyesore. Added the second woman, who introduced herself as Deanne Miller, the HOA secretary. That night, I searched online for HOA car restoration disputes and found dozens of similar stories. Some homeowners had won, many had lost, and all had endured months of stress. I considered giving up, moving the project to a rented garage space, but the cost would be prohibitive. Instead, I decided to build support. The next morning, I went door to door, introducing myself to neighbors and explaining my project. Many were actually interested, especially those with teenage sons who wanted to see the restoration process. I invited them to stop by, ask questions, and check out the progress. By the end of the week, I had a small fan club. Martin Delaney from 3 doors down brought his 12-year-old son over to see the engine. Sofia Rodriguez, a retired art teacher across the street, said the car's lines were pure sculpture and that my restoration was preserving cultural heritage. When Friday arrived, Patricia's deadline, I was ready. I had collected signatures from 15 neighbors who supported my project, created a detailed timeline showing the restoration would be complete within 4 months, and prepared a formal request for a temporary structure permit. I was just putting the finishing touches on my presentation when I heard the unmistakable sound of a tow truck backing up my driveway. I sprinted outside to find Patricia standing next to a flatbed tow truck, arms crossed triumphantly. The driver, a burly man in overalls, was already lowering the hydraulic platform. "What the hell is this?" I demanded. "Section 15, paragraph 2, Patricia said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Abandoned vehicles may be removed at the owner's expense." Abandoned. "This is clearly not abandoned. I'm actively working on it. It hasn't moved in over 2 weeks, has no engine installed, and is non-operational," she countered. "By definition, that's abandoned." I stepped between the tow truck driver and my Corvette. "You are not touching this car. It's on private property and I do not consent to its removal." The driver looked uncomfortable. "Look, buddy, I'm just doing my job. The lady called for a tow. She has no right to. This is my property, my car, my driveway." Patricia thrust a paper at me. "This is a formal notice of violation. The HOA bylaws give us the authority to remove nuisance vehicles." I snatched the paper and scanned it quickly. It was indeed a violation notice, but something caught my eye. It was dated 3 weeks ago, before I'd even moved in. "This is fraudulent," I said, holding up the notice. "This is dated before I even owned the property. You backdated this to skip the required notice period." Patricia's face flushed. "Nonsense. You're trying to find technicalities to avoid compliance." I turned to the tow truck driver. "This is illegal. She's falsifying documents to have you remove a vehicle without proper authorization. Do you want to be part of that?" The driver hesitated, looking between us. "I need valid paperwork to remove a vehicle from private property." "The HOA has authority," Patricia began, but I cut her off. "The HOA has to follow its own procedures, which include proper notification periods. This document is fraudulent." After a tense standoff, the tow truck driver got back in his vehicle. "Call me when you've got this sorted out," he told Patricia and drove away. Patricia was livid. "This isn't over, Mr. Young. Not by a long shot." True to her word, the next day I received a certified letter from the HOA listing 6 separate violations, including the abandoned vehicle, unauthorized temporary structure, excessive noise, improper signage, unsightly conditions, and commercial activity in a residential zone. Each violation carried a $100 daily fine, retroactive to my move-in date. The total already exceeded $10,000, and the letter stated that a lien would be placed on my property if not paid within 30 days. I called a lawyer the same day. Monica Fitzgerald specialized in HOA disputes and agreed to meet with me immediately after I explained the situation. Her office was small but professional, with framed law degrees and what looked like awards for community service on the walls. "They can't just backdate violation notices," Monica said after reviewing my documents, "and these fines are excessive even by HOA standards. So what do I do? First, we document everything. Take photos of your setup, get statements from supportive neighbors, and gather any evidence that the HOA is treating you differently than others in similar situations. Second, we attend the next board meeting and formally challenge these violations. Third, if necessary, we file a civil complaint for harassment and abuse of authority." The HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at the community center. I spent the intervening days gathering evidence. Several neighbors provided written statements supporting my project, and I took dozens of photos documenting the neat, organized nature of my workspace. I also discovered 3 other homes where visible car maintenance had occurred without HOA interference. Monica and I arrived at the meeting early, setting up a small display of photos showing the Corvette's historical value and my careful restoration process. The room filled quickly, with more residents than usual attending. Word had spread about the dispute. Patricia called the meeting to order, noticeably stiffening when she saw me with legal representation. The first hour dragged through routine business landscaping contracts, a proposal for new playground equipment, approval of previous minutes. Finally, Patricia said, "Next item, property violations at 1437 Meadowlark Lane." Monica stood immediately. "Before you proceed, I'd like to address the board regarding the improper issuance of violation notices to my client, Henry Young." Patricia frowned. "This is an internal HOA matter, which affects my client's property rights and potentially constitutes harassment," Monica interrupted smoothly. "Mr. Young has documentation proving that violation notices were backdated, excessive fines were imposed without proper notification, and that similar activities by other homeowners have not resulted in enforcement actions." A murmur went through the room. One of the board members, an older gentleman I hadn't met, leaned over to whisper something to Patricia. "We'll hear your objections," Patricia said reluctantly, "but the board's decision on violations is final according to our bylaws." For the next 20 minutes, Monica methodically presented our case, showing the fraudulent dates on the violation notices, highlighting the selective enforcement, and emphasizing that my restoration project was temporary, neat, and supported by many neighbors. When she finished, several residents stood to speak in my favor. Martin Delaney described how his son was learning about engineering from visiting my project. Sofia Rodriguez called it living history and educational. Even Richard Martinez's wife spoke up, saying she thought the car was interesting and not an eyesore at all. Patricia's face grew increasingly pinched as more residents voiced support. When the room finally quieted, she cleared her throat. "While we appreciate community input, the board must enforce our regulations consistently. The violations stand." Monica was ready. "In that case, we're prepared to file a civil complaint for harassment, fraud, abuse of authority, and selective enforcement. Additionally, we'll seek an injunction against any further enforcement actions while the case is pending." The older board member, who introduced himself as Walter Cooper, the HOA treasurer, spoke up. "Perhaps we can find a compromise. What if Mr. Young applies for a temporary structure permit with a clear end date for the project? The regulations allow for exceptions in cases of historical preservation," added Deanne Miller, looking directly at Patricia. "This does qualify as a historically significant vehicle." I could see Patricia realized she was losing control of the situation. Her allies on the board were wavering, and the community sentiment was clearly against her. "Fine," she said tightly. "Mr. Young can submit an application for a temporary permit, which the board will consider. In the meantime, all fines are suspended." It wasn't a complete victory, but it was progress. After the meeting, Walter approached me privately. "Patricia has been overzealous since becoming president," he confided. "Between you and me, I think that Corvette is cool as hell." My dad had won back in the day. "Keep it reasonable, keep it tidy, and you'll have my vote for the permit." The next few weeks were blissfully quiet. I continued working on the Corvette, keeping everything meticulously organized. Neighbors stopped by regularly to check on my progress, and I even hosted an impromptu educational session for the neighborhood kids, explaining how internal combustion engines work. The engine was now fully rebuilt, the frame had been repaired and strengthened, and I was making progress on the body work. The Nassau blue paint was mixed and waiting, and I had sourced original-style upholstery for the interior. The project was coming together beautifully. 3 weeks after the meeting, I received notice that my temporary structure permit had been approved, with conditions. The restoration had to be completed within 6 months. All work had to occur between 9 a.m. and 7 p.m. to minimize noise, and I had to keep the area clean and organized. I was elated and sent a thank you note to the board members who had supported me. Patricia, notably, had been the only dissenting vote. For 2 months, things proceeded smoothly. The Corvette was rapidly transforming from a neglected relic to a stunning example of American automotive design. I documented every step with photos and videos, creating an online diary that attracted attention from Corvette enthusiasts nationwide. Then came the rainy Saturday, when everything changed again. I was working inside the house that day, cleaning and polishing smaller components while waiting for the weather to clear. Around noon, I heard a vehicle outside and looked out the window to see Patricia's silver Mercedes SUV parked across the street. She appeared to be taking pictures of my house. Concerned, I grabbed a jacket and headed outside. By the time I reached the curb, she was driving away. I checked my driveway and tent setup. Everything was in order, no violations of any kind. The next day was sunny, and I spent it applying the first coat of primer to the Corvette's body. The transformation was already remarkable, with the car's sleek lines emerging from months of restoration work. I was just cleaning up for the day when a county code enforcement vehicle pulled into my driveway. A uniformed officer stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Young." "I'm Officer Daniels with County Code Enforcement. We received a complaint about unauthorized commercial activity and structures on your property." My stomach dropped. "Commercial activity? This is a personal restoration project." He nodded toward my tent. "The complaint states you're running an auto repair business without proper zoning or permits." "That's absolutely false," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm restoring a single vintage car, my car. I have HOA approval for the temporary tent structure. There's no business being conducted here." Officer Daniels walked around the tent making notes. "Do you ever have people come by to look at the car?" "Neighbors, yes. It's a point of interest in the community. Many people are following the restoration. Any money changing hands? Parts sales, services rendered? Absolutely not." He made a few more notes, then handed me a card. "I don't see any evidence of commercial activity, but I'll need to verify your HOA permit for the structure. Can you email me a copy?" "Of course," I said, relief washing over me. "I have all the documentation inside." As Officer Daniels was leaving, Patricia's Mercedes cruised slowly past my house. Our eyes met briefly, and I could see the disappointment on her face when she realized the code enforcement officer wasn't shutting me down. That evening, I called Monica to update her on the situation. "She's escalating," Monica said grimly. "Going outside the HOA to county enforcement is a significant step. We should prepare for more harassment." "What can she possibly do next? The HOA approved my project. The county found no violations. HOA disputes can get ugly." "Document everything, save security camera footage if you have it, and keep me updated on any further incidents." 2 days later, I returned home from a parts run to find water flooding my driveway, pouring from beneath the tent. I rushed inside to discover that someone had turned on my outdoor water spigot full blast, directing the hose under the tent's edge. Water had pooled several inches deep on the tarp floor I'd installed, and some had reached the Corvette. Thankfully, I had raised the car on jack stands, so the body and mechanical components were untouched, but my tools and some parts boxes were soaked. I quickly shut off the water, then checked my recently installed security camera. The footage clearly showed Patricia entering my property while I was gone, deliberately turning on the water and positioning the hose under the tent before hurrying away. The timestamp showed this had happened just 30 minutes before I returned. I was furious, but controlled myself enough to document everything methodically. I took photos and videos of the damage, saved multiple copies of the security footage, and called Monica. Then I called the police to report trespassing and vandalism. Officer Trevor Williams arrived within the hour. He was in his early 30s, professional but friendly and genuinely interested when I explained the situation. "Let me get this straight," he said, reviewing the security footage on my laptop. "The HOA president did this because she doesn't like you fixing up a classic car. She's been trying to stop the restoration since day one," I explained. "Even though I have official approval now, she's still harassing me." Officer Williams shook his head. "That's clearly her on the video. Trespassing and vandalism, minimum. Any idea what the water damage will cost to repair?" I estimated around $2,000 for damaged tools and materials, plus the time needed to dry everything out and reorganize. "I'll file the report," he said. "We'll be contacting Miss Wellington for questioning. In the meantime, I'd recommend pressing charges. This kind of behavior typically escalates if there are no consequences." After Officer Williams left, I spent hours salvaging what I could. Most of my power tools had been submerged and would need professional servicing or replacement. Cardboard parts boxes had disintegrated, leaving me to sort and identify components scattered across the wet tarp. Around 7 p.m., as I was still cleaning up, Richard Martinez appeared at the edge of my driveway. "Henry, I heard about what happened," he said, looking genuinely concerned. "Is there anything I can do to help?" I was surprised by the offer. "Thanks, Richard. I think I've got it under control now." He hesitated, then said, "Look, I want you to know that the rest of the board had no idea Patricia would do something like this. We've called an emergency meeting tomorrow night. This crosses a line." "I've filed a police report," I told him. "They have video evidence." Richard nodded. "Good. She needs to face consequences. This isn't what the HOA is supposed to be about." The next day, Patricia Wellington was arrested at her home on charges of criminal trespassing, vandalism, and destruction of property. The news spread through Sunshine Meadows like wildfire. By evening, my phone was buzzing constantly with supportive messages from neighbors. The emergency HOA board meeting was held in the community center, and unlike regular meetings, this one was packed. Nearly every homeowner in Sunshine Meadows showed up, buzzing with speculation and outrage. Walter Cooper called the meeting to order, explaining that Patricia had been temporarily removed from her position pending the outcome of criminal charges. Richard Martinez would serve as interim president. "This board wants to formally apologize to Henry Young for the actions of our former president," Walter announced. "Her behavior was reprehensible and does not reflect the values of our community or the purpose of this HOA." The room erupted in applause. I sat quietly, still processing everything that had happened. Richard stood up next. "Moving forward, we're proposing changes to our HOA regulations and enforcement procedures. First, all violation notices must be reviewed by at least 3 board members before issuance. Second, we're creating an appeals process for homeowners who feel they've been unfairly targeted. And third, we're forming a committee to review our existing regulations and recommend updates to better balance community standards with individual property rights." More applause followed, along with calls for Patricia's permanent removal. The meeting lasted over 2 hours as residents shared stories of Patricia's previous overreach, everything from disputes over paint colors to fines for holiday decorations left up too long. By the end of the evening, a community that had felt divided and controlled began to feel like a neighborhood again. Several residents volunteered to help with my Corvette restoration, offering tools, expertise, or just an extra set of hands. In the weeks that followed, Patricia's legal troubles mounted. During the investigation, police discovered she had been embezzling from the HOA treasury small amounts at first, then increasingly larger sums totaling nearly $50,000 over 3 years. She had used the money for personal expenses, including her Mercedes payments and a vacation home rental in Florida. The criminal case expanded to include fraud and embezzlement charges, and Patricia eventually accepted a plea deal: restitution of all stolen funds, 2 years of probation, and a ban from serving in any HOA or community governance position. She sold her house and moved away before the case was fully resolved, unable to face her neighbors after the truth came out. With the tyranny of Patricia's leadership ended, Sunshine Meadows transformed. The new board, led permanently by Richard Martinez after a special election, focused on building community rather than enforcing petty rules. They sponsored block parties, created a community garden, and even organized a classic car show where my nearly completed Corvette was the star attraction. 4 months after the water incident, on a perfect autumn day, I rolled the fully restored 1967 Corvette Stingray out of the tent for the last time. Its Nassau blue paint gleamed in the sunlight, chrome bumpers and trim pieces sparkled, and the rebuilt 327 engine purred with a deep, satisfying rumble that echoed through the neighborhood. Neighbors gathered to witness the unveiling, applauding as I took the first official drive around the block. The car performed flawlessly, a testament to countless hours of meticulous restoration work. Walter Cooper, now my good friend, slapped me on the back as I returned to the driveway. "Your uncle would be proud, Henry. That's a museum piece right there." "Not a museum piece," I corrected him with a smile. "This beauty's meant to be driven." That weekend, I hosted a neighborhood cookout to celebrate the completion of the project and thank everyone for their support. The Corvette sat in the driveway, gleaming like a jewel, surrounded by admirers of all ages. Richard Martinez raised a toast during the gathering. To Henry and his incredible Corvette, proof that persistence pays off and that even the most difficult challenges can lead to positive change. Our community is stronger because you stood your ground. 6 months later, the revised HOA regulations were formally adopted. They included clear, reasonable standards for property maintenance, but emphasized community cooperation over punitive enforcement. Special provisions were added for hobby projects, historic preservation, and temporary structures informally dubbed the Corvette Clause by residents. I still live in Sunshine Meadows, now serving on the HOA board myself as the chairman of the Community Events Committee. My garage has become a gathering spot for car enthusiasts, and I've helped several neighbors with their own automotive projects. The famous blue Corvette sits in my garage most days, but every weekend, weather permitting, I take it for a drive through the neighborhood and beyond. Children wave as I pass, and new residents often stop me to ask about the car's story. I always tell them it's more than just a story about a car. It's about standing up for yourself, about community overcoming tyranny, and about how sometimes restoring something old and beautiful can restore something in ourselves as well. Last month, a film crew from a classic car television show came to document the Corvette and its restoration journey. During the interview, they asked if I regretted moving to a neighborhood with an HOA, given all the trouble it caused. Not at all, I told them honestly. This neighborhood taught me that systems are only as good or bad as the people running them. With the right people involved, even an HOA can build community instead of dividing it. As I pulled the Corvette into my driveway after the interview, I noticed a family moving in across the street. Their moving truck was piled high with furniture, and I spotted what looked like a motorcycle under a cover in the back. I walked over to introduce myself, extending my hand to the husband who was directing the movers. "Welcome to Sunshine Meadows," I said with a smile. "I'm Henry Young, your neighbor and HOA board member, and don't worry, we're pretty reasonable around here these days, especially about passion projects." His relief was visible as he shook my hand. "That's good to hear. I've got a vintage Triumph motorcycle I've been wanting to restore." "Well," I said, nodding toward my Corvette, "I might have some advice about that, and trust me, the HOA won't stand in your way." As I walked back home, I couldn't help but smile at how far we'd come. From Patricia's tyranny to a community that supported individuality while respecting shared spaces, it had been quite a journey, parallel to the Corvette's transformation from neglected relic to gleaming masterpiece. Sometimes the best restorations aren't just about cars. Sometimes they're about restoring faith in community, in justice, and in the power of standing up for what matters. My uncle's Corvette had given me that chance, and I would be forever grateful for the day I pulled that dusty tarp away and started the engine of change.